Cheryl Wagner. I believe she's absent.
Cheryl's present.
She's, oh, you're online, Cheryl? Okay. Tracy Smith. Sid.
Here.
Hank. Melanie Kelsey.
Here.
Dina.
Here.
Mark Perry.
Here.
Nancy Way is here. We have our agendas in front of us. Are there any proposed changes? None?
None.
I think we're going to have quite a long time on the parks planning for Big Rock. So we'll hope that some of the presentations for reports are short. We also have our meeting summary from our last meeting. Are there any comments or changes to that?
No.
Okay, if there's no proposed changes and no objections, I move that we approve the summary. The summary is approved. Next, do we have any public comment? Anyone online? No one online. So let's move along to our first topic for the night, which is the Beaton Hill and Big Rock Park South Master Plan discussion programming.
Great. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Commission. This is the Commission's second opportunity to provide input into the Big Rock South and Beaton Hill Master Plan project. And tonight, you'll get a chance to see some of the preliminary concepts. And we'd love to hear your feedback and give you a chance to think about these things. And then they will be brought back with our joint meeting with City Council in September. So with us tonight, we have our project manager, Shelby Peralt. Also, Valerie Storashev, our new park planning intern. So glad to have her aboard as well. And then our consultant, Juliet Vaughn, the landscape architect from HBB. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Shelby and Juliet. We have a little bit of an issue just as we're transitioning here. We're not able to turn our videos on. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see Shelby or Juliet, but unless we get something worked out in the meantime. But anyway, it's not for lack of wanting to, it's just we can't turn on any video. So go ahead, Shelby.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. As
We have
Kevin,
some more sound here. You're very weak. Is everyone else able to hear?
I can hear online well.
does this work a little bit
Anyone hear
better?
her? Very well. No one on the dais can hear her.
Hold on one second, Shelby.
Okay.
Although I'm enjoying the music outside. They are good.
Shelby, can you try to talk again, please?
Hello.
Better. Still, we need more, I think.
Shelby, you'll have to use your outside voice. And you're competing with a jazz band
Yeah,
outside the
you're competing
window.
with the Royals, and they're pretty good.
Okay, well, just bear with me. I am getting over a cold, so if I cough or if I pause, that's
Yeah,
why.
we got you now. We got you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so tonight, like Kevin mentioned, we're here to talk about the concept alternatives for Beaton Hill Park and Big Rock Park South master plans. And like he mentioned also, we have Juliet Vaughn, principal of HBB Landscape Architecture with us tonight. And Alexa, thank you for being my slide tracker. You can go to the next one. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to receive preliminary input on both programming and concept alternatives at each park. Next. Juliet and I will be tag teaming tonight's presentation. I will introduce you to both park sites, walk you through the timeline, discuss project background, existing conditions, and I will end with our outreach process and outcome. I will then hand things off to Juliet, and she will walk you through programming and concept alternatives for both sites before getting your initial feedback on both items. And then we will conclude with next steps. So starting off with introduction to the master plan and the project sites. When starting on a master plan process, we look to our previous comprehensive studies, such as the 2018 Pro Plan, as a baseline to help us understand what's important to the community, what's already been discussed, and what the citywide vision is for the park system. The Pro Plan goal is to see parks as an integral part of our healthy and sustainable community by connecting people to nature, play, and culture. So within that overall vision, our Pro Plan has 3 core goals. So first is the conservation of natural resources. Second is improving health and wellness. And third is social equity and access to our parks. This becomes the framework that you'll hear us talk about throughout this process. We continually come back to this vision and these core goals as we test our concepts, design ideas, and what we hear in the early stages. Next. So to help orient everyone, if you're not familiar, Beaton Hill Park and the Big Rock Park systems are centrally located within the city. Beaton Hill Park, highlighted in red in the middle of your screen, is across the street from the 3 Big Rock Park properties, which are all connected and then terminate with Big Rock Park South along Southeast 20th Street. And then within a close proximity to these parks are Ebright Creek to the west and Pine Lake Park to the south. And then next, moving to an overview of the master plan process, timeline, and background for each site. We want to remind everyone again what a master plan is and what it isn't. So a master plan is a guiding document. It's intended to set a vision for each park, to look at what types of uses, activities, and programming we want to see, and to look at the relationships of those programs to make sure that they fit within the context of the site. And we want to consider what the short and long-term goals are of those elements. So we go through this extensive process that you see. Number 4, which is outlined in blue, is where we are today. We have taken feedback on hopes, dreams, and concerns from the community, from you, and from our city council to prepare project goals. And those goals established, preliminary concepts for each park are then developed. And we are now at the point of reviewing these project goals and preliminary concepts, which will then be refined into one preferred alternative based on the feedback we get from the community, the commission, and the council. So what a master plan is not is a detailed design. And that's important to remember. We look at feasibility, we look at relationships, we look at structures needed to support programming, but there is a more detailed design process that comes with the implementation of those items, and that is not included in our master plan. Our final deliverable is a report for each park. Next. So I'd like to quickly walk you through the master plan timeline. We finished our first round of outreach in April, and this outreach, along with our site analysis, helped to set the framework for developing goals and objectives of the park program and for preparing 3 concepts at each park. And like I mentioned on the previous slide, that is where we are today. During this next stage, we move on to master plan development, where we continue to refine concepts that get narrowed down into one preferred plan. Once consensus is reached on preferred plans at both parks, the SEPA process begins. And then following SEPA determination, staff return to City Council for formal adoption of each park master plan. Next. And the next is a little bit of history for each park. So starting off with Beaton, which is going to be highlighted in red. This park is made up of 2 parcels that total just under 9.5 acres. They were purchased in 2018 in an effort to preserve open space in a rapidly developing area in the city. It's named for the family that owned the farmstead for over 80 years. And then following acquisition, the city was awarded a King County Conservation Futures Grant as a reimbursement for approximately 4 acres of the site. And this acreage will be designated for permanent conservation. The home and accessory buildings were demolished after acquisition, and now the land is vacant. Next is Big Rock Park South, which is the third and final property in the phase land donation agreement. It was donated in November of 21 and totals 15 acres. And then similar to conditions that were placed on the previous 2 parcels, this park will have a variety of low impact active and passive activities. And that may include nature trails, open space, or passive sports meadows. And then on this site, there are a few existing structures and a great network of established trails. And then next, briefly recapping existing conditions, and I'll start off with Beaton Hill. Beaton is characterized by open meadows, rolling hills in the south, steeper slopes in the upper half, and mature trees within the tree preservation. And that preservation area is colored in red. And there are also sensitive areas throughout the site. Next. And then moving in, we have 2 wetlands in that blue diagonal hatched area, in addition to a seasonal stream that flows closer to the property line and then eventually continues to Big Rock. The dash and dotted white line you see throughout the graphic is our buffers for both the streams and wetlands. And as I mentioned earlier, with the steeper slopes in the upper half, our high point is on the northwest side, which is in the left of the graphic. And then our low point is in the southeast corner, which is the bottom right of the graphic. This topography is a great opportunity because it gives great character to the site. But with that, there will be some constraints when addressing accessibility. And then next, moving on to Big Rock South. Big Rock South is characterized by gardens around the residence, water elements throughout the property, and a beautiful focal point with the pond and willow tree, as well as an established network of trails, which is similar to our other Big Rock parcels. There is mature tree canopy in the northern half, which is the upper part of the photo, and relatively flat open meadows in the middle and in the south of the site. And then moving on to structures, we have a total of 5 structures on site, from a pool house and sport court. So while there's no pool house anymore, the sport court sits on top of it, the name stuck. We also have a single family residence, a few garages, one that's older and one that's newer. The one that's older is on the upper right photo, as well as a large barn. And then moving to opportunities and constraints, there are a large network of trails, like I mentioned, and those are marked with a red dashed line. There are a series of wetlands on site in that same blue hatch, along with their associated buffers that are noted in a white dash. You can see structures on the south side of the site. The wetlands are interconnected, at least some of them. So those flow into the pond that's just north of the garages, and eventually leave the site. Great opportunities for reuse of these structures, touching on history of the property from the donor and trail connections that connect to the other Big Rock properties and neighborhood. And then next, moving on to outreach and what we heard during the listening phase. So in April, we hosted 3 events for the community to provide their hopes and dreams for each park. Shout out to Nancy and Mark for helping us on Earth Day and Open House. Those were on April 23rd. And then our 3rd event was a virtual workshop on April 28th. From these events, we received a good amount of input on hopes and dreams. Some of these examples include different types of gardens, play and education, looking at trail connections to other parks and neighborhoods, including more gathering spaces for programming, and being flexible on site to have both active and passive recreation, and then also retaining the natural character of the site. And then on the photos on the left, there is a photo from our Earth Day booth. And then the bottom right is one of our live polls during the workshop. And then next. And also, as part of our first round of outreach, we published a web-based community survey. This survey was live for approximately 3 weeks, and I do want to note that it was not a statistically valid survey. We had 184 participants, with 20% living within half a mile of the parks, and roughly 2/3 of the participants live in the city. And then when asked about what was liked about the existing Big Rock system, we saw things from history to open space to different types of play, our trails, and native plants. We have a word cloud with this question on the right side of the screen. So the bigger the word, the more often it was noted. And then next, we also asked about guiding principles to help inform our overall goals and objectives for the parks. This is where we asked about how important certain priorities are, from not important to very important. Some examples include being very important to retain the site's natural character, whereas not important for the sites to host very large events. With this question, we also asked if we were missing any principles that are important to include. And we have a word cloud again on the right. And example of this include activities, natural, environmental education, playgrounds, and community engagement. And then the last item I'll touch on from the survey is specifically for building preservation at Big Rock South. So 58% of our participants said that buildings should only be preserved if they can be reused for other programs and activities. And then when asked to prioritize which structures should be preserved, the barn and pool house ranked the highest. So to recap, what comes from this first round of outreach are goals for our master plans. This outreach includes the community meetings and survey, in addition to feedback that we receive from the City Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission. And these goals set the framework for developing initial park concepts. So the Beaton Hill Park and Big Rock Park system serve as an oasis of nature within our city limits. The master plans for each park should, one, continue to be a place of respite, contemplation, and exploration of the natural environment that it is today, protected for future generations. Second, it should connect, educate, and inspire people of all ages and abilities to discover more about each other and our surroundings. Third, it should provide safe access to everyone of all abilities to the amazing places and experiences throughout the parks. And then fourth, it should allow everyone the flexibility to be active or passive in how they choose to recreate, providing opportunities for both in a way that respects and fits into the context of the site. So after quickly walking through our background and survey, I will now pass the baton to Juliet to walk you through programming and concept alternatives before starting our discussion tonight. Take it away, Juliet.
Confirming everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we're going to start with just a series of photos to start to give you an idea of the types of activities that you'll see in the various concepts. These first is a group of different types of play. So play you're going to see as a theme throughout all of these concepts. I think obviously starting with what's existing with the nature play in Big Rock North and building all of that into kind of the consistency as one of the elements that help really define the character of all of these different spaces. And so these are just examples of the different types of play that you'll see in the various concepts. Universal play really focuses on all ages and abilities. It's more than just traditional structures. It's about having open spaces and quiet spaces. Well, you'll often see it paired with sensory kinds of gardens and spaces, as well as play elements and various art elements. So think of it really as playful for both the passive and active types of activities. Hillside play, as Shelby said, is really building on the slope and the topography we have, and that can be in very natural ways. It can also include and integrate more traditional elements like slides. The next ones we have are what we're calling whimsical play and play nodes. Whimsical play is really about that sense of wonder and discovery, something that you come upon, and it may be art, it may be touchable and playable, or it could just be something set into the landscape. That's just really sort of a way to experience something, to really see and discover something neat. So you're like kind of running through and being excited by and surprised by these different little discoveries. They can be playful, things that you can play on, and they can also just be very sculptural kind of surprising elements. And then play nodes is really, think of it in terms of playable types of features, right? Less traditional, although you can include some traditional features, but really places that can activate imagination, that can fit a little bit more into a natural environment. And they're also really just a smaller sort of scale of play space. You'll see some very typical activities that you see in a lot of parks: picnic shelters, open lawn. We do have a smaller amphitheater in one of the examples, and you'll see that when we go through those concepts. And then some of the more active activities that we have: the disc golf, pickleball courts, and one of the options has potential for an off-leash dog area. We're going to see a number of gardens and different types of gardens. So those garden spaces are not super defined in these concepts. They're kind of more defined by labels and sort of a general area, but the idea is to integrate education in these garden spaces really into the environment. So you're creating sensory experiences, pollinators, native plants, things that are going to help us achieve those goals of really appreciating and experiencing the natural environment that we heard so much about, and what people really loved about the park system as it is now. And then we have integrated pea patches in a couple of those options as well. So pea patches being more formal garden spaces, things that community members can come garden their own little plots. They are typically fenced, so keep that in mind as you think about and see how we've integrated them into the different concepts. And then for the buildings themselves, we've done some studies on what we can do and how feasible it is to reuse these buildings for various activities. The pool house, we have opportunity for smaller meeting spaces within the building itself and accessibility, and are able to feel we can achieve accessibility to really use that space. And then in a number of concepts, we have identified sort of outdoor and lawn event spaces. We see opportunities for that activity to be able to spill into the exterior environment. The barn, we have two options that we're showing in some of these concepts. One is just as events, larger events, different sizes of events, both indoor and some ability to spill outdoors as well, but also as a recreation type space. Something that could be a little bit more active, something that could be timed to different user groups, or just be open to all of the community as well. And then the other buildings that we have on site are the residence, which has opportunities for smaller gathering and spaces and meetings, getting better accessibility into the building, and then using that main floor. The second floor would be mostly for storage, since accessibility would not be as feasible. And then the old garage, which is the one that doesn't have the solar panels on it, closer to the pond. You'll see some concepts that really try to open that up a lot so we can see through it and really experience and get a greater sense of entry, which then can be used as picnic shelters and kind of those open gathering spaces. The newer garage and all of the options, you won't see a photo here, is proposed to be used for park maintenance. All right, we've named our concepts. This first alternative is called the gradient of activities. We do fully expect some discussions of mixing and matching, but it's helpful to kind of organize around a central theme. So in this one, we really are looking at the most passive uses to the south with Big Rock South. And then as you progress to the north, you get a little bit more active already naturally with the nature play at Big Rock North. And then moving across the street into Beaton Hill becomes a more active space. So we have more active lawn, the hillside play, whereas Big Rock South really focuses on those natural elements, the gardens, the walking, the picnicking, and those trail systems. So we're going to zoom in on each park site. And then with Big Rock South, we're going to zoom in a little bit further because it's a larger site and show you the more active area. Starting with Beaton Hill, what this concept means is a central, larger open space. So this would be an open lawn We've shown in kind of a dashed line sort of the limits of a youth soccer, so you can see it as reference, not a full soccer field, but that it would just be an open space that would have some flexibility for a variety of sports or more active or less active kinds of activities on that lawn. Take advantage of the hillside with more traditional play structures and really integrating play throughout that hillside and around the trails. And then a lot of picnic areas kind of all throughout. So some color definition that you'll see on this plan, and you'll see this through all of the concepts. The pink that you see on the plan represents those plaza spaces. The tannish colors represents paths. Those would be more paved paths, mostly accessible. So we get accessibility from one side of the park through to the other. Whereas the brown kind of trails through the trees are all the nature trails. All of the concepts connect to the Big Rock Park systems. And so you have an integrated system of trails all the way throughout. And then all of the concepts have nature trails as well as paved trails so that you get both accessibility and the ability to get a little bit further into those trees and those natural systems, predominantly for overlooks and educational opportunities. With the more active elements at Beaton Hill, we also integrated the pea patch into this concept. And we have a little bit more extension of trails into the wetlands with an actual boardwalk that connects through the wetland and then heads up the hillside. You're going to see a variety of parking options. We did that very intentionally throughout each of these parks. So what you'll see in all cases where you see parking on Southeast 8th Street, we are transitioning that parking from the direct 90-degree head in, which requires people to back out into traffic on Southeast 8th Street, to what is essentially a back-in angled parking. So what that means is you're stopping in lane, you're backing your car into that angled space. That way, when you are pulling out, you have much better visibility, a much safer interaction with anybody else oncoming traffic. And as you're unloading that car of kids, pets, and other things, you're unloading it into a much safer space. We are also heard a lot about the concern with people and how do people turn around and how does that traffic and function move. So we are integrating mid-block crossings, which would have to have no parking on either side of them so we can really get a safer views and a safer experience, really highlight that crossing for pedestrians. And then in these also concepts where we do have on-street parking, we are showing a turnaround option so that if you're coming through here from the neighborhood, you're turning around in a safe space and not necessarily trying to do it in the middle of the street. And that is consistent for all the options. In all of the options, we also have some amount of parking drop off or turnaround on the north side, and that's really been integrated in order to gain accessibility and actually make sure that we have that equitable distribution of uses. So you can use those shelters and trails and other spaces that are in the north end of the site, always with a focus on accessibility and ADA parking in that area. But in some cases, like in this option, you see a few extra stalls as well. So here, parking is split between a little few stalls in that northern area and then expanding the amount of parking that we have on Southeast 8th. The restrooms are also split. We heard a lot about restrooms and wanting restrooms within the park system. So in all the options, we show a restroom on Big Rock North where it's proposed in the master plan. And then in this case, we have another restroom up in the north of Beaton Hill as well. All right, so taking a little more time with this first one so that you can get a little bit more familiar with the graphics and with the labels, and then we'll move a little bit quicker through these next ones. All right, so Big Rock South for the gradient of activities is really intended to be the much more passive experience. So we have the big open meadow is just a nice informal lawn. We have a number of picnic shelters throughout the trail systems. The trails in all concepts are essentially the existing trails with a few exceptions. So one of the things you'll see in all of our concepts is the integration of a disc golf course. We get about a 9-hole disc golf course. Most of those are on Big Rock South, adjacent to and through the trees, outside of all of the sensitive areas and wetlands. That's where we have the most opportunity to integrate those disc golf courses. But there is a few holes that would extend into Big Rock Central. I think there's about 2 holes to get into Big Rock Central before you would loop back around and finish off the course on Big Rock South. It's shown and labeled in here, and we can talk about that a little bit more if we have more questions. In Big Rock South, since we're not integrating any specific play area or playground or playscape type of system, we are looking at that trail system to integrate a variety of smaller activities. So playscapes, play nodes, things that are a little bit smaller scale that really fit into the natural context of those trails as they sit today. The buildings, and actually let me pause there and probably just talk about the buildings and the plazas and the parking when we zoom into this next slide. What I want to mention here in this example is that all of the, again, the paved trails are that lighter tan color. So in all of the options, we really looked at how you get a good system of loop trails that are fully accessible, that integrate both the open spaces as well as into the trees. And that then support a lot of the passive picnicking and other activities off of those trails. So zooming in a little bit more, you see the parking in this configuration is really focused up in the corner. We do bring in a parking lot that can support the uses that we have programmed for the buildings, as well as a turnaround space, and the drop-off would be part of that turnaround near the barn. The uses we have here basically are, in all cases, the barn. This one is the barn is used for meetings and events. We do have a new restroom located in all of the options. We need a public restroom for people who are just experiencing the park and not here for any event at any of the buildings. Number 3 in all options, the new garage is always going to be park maintenance. So then the residence and the pool house become those events. In this case, the residence has that spill out of the exterior space. So you see that pink plaza around the pool house. That's so you really get that indoor-outdoor experience. And there's a beautiful little semi-enclosed lawn just off the pool house that would be used for various events. You start to see the labels for all the various types of sensory gardens, pollinator gardens, really focused around these open spaces. So you get this connectivity of gathering spaces, open spaces, trails, and some surprising sort of integrated elements throughout those walks. In all cases, the apple orchard is existing. The other thing you'll see in all cases, we talked about a bit last time we met, was the kind of heavily dense buffer that we have on the hedge that's adjacent to Southeast 20th. In all options, we do pull that back. We would need to replace that with a lower growing vegetation so we can still keep some sense of kind of that entrance that you feel when you come into the site, but you also build that in with some better visibility for safety and security into the park. Let's go ahead and go to the next concept we're calling whimsy and discovery. So in this one, we're really focusing on trails, and we're focusing on the trails as this thread of activity, interest, and sort of surprise that really connect Big Rock South all the way through to Beaton Hill on the north. Educational elements in both this concept as well as all of the concepts you see really focus along those trails, and they can be ecological, natural features, history, and cultural elements as you experience them throughout. So what that means for Beaton Hill Park on the north end is the parking again along Southeast 8th, but we do scale it back a little bit and shift that turnaround into the Beaton Hill on the north instead of into the Big Rock. That does leave some opportunity for some expansion of that parking down Southeast 8th if needed, but it focuses a little bit closer on where we can have easy access to that turnaround. We then pull parking into that central space where we have some natural topography is a little flatter. We have a little easier access that allows us some ADA accessibility and more parking central to Beaton Hill, but also provides some overflow in pretty close proximity to the Big Rock North. The northern area is then an emergency turnaround access, a drop off, and just ADA only stalls, which then feed the restroom, and a much larger shelter, which allows larger group events and programming, and also has this amazing view kind of cascading down over the rest of the site. You can see here we do integrate the amphitheater, so you can have some impromptu activities and events, as well as potentially some smaller, more formal ones, and then a series of shelters and play spaces throughout. So here you start to get what we're calling the whimsical elements. Those are those blue asterisks. Those would be those elements of surprise, of playfulness, of interest that can be both on the trail. They'd be more playful and interactive, and in some cases they're just offset, so you see them in a distance and a little bit more sculptural. The pink areas again represent those gathering places, and then the trails that interconnect all the way through. We did bring in 2 pickleball courts into this concept and a play area. So with a play area, once we get that slightly larger size, really allows us to get more sensory, more universal play, more accessible play. And then it feeds within close proximity to Big Rock North, but still far enough away that we are kind of nicely situated into the site. When we move to Big Rock Park South in this concept, then we start to bring in those whimsical elements as a connecting piece that comes all the way through the trail system. We still have the disc golf course that you see through there and the open lawn. In this case, we keep all of the buildings. We add a restroom down by the pool house, and we still have a lot of those gardens and events. If you zoom into the next slide, the existing court is repurposed outside of the pool house. So we would keep that and maintain that use, which then means the open lawn and the events really want to push a little bit more around that existing pond. So it becomes really very much a garden kind of experience to if you have any other sorts of those outdoor events. The barn still remains for meetings and other types of events. In this case, the old garage, which is the one that is labeled number 6 here on this plan, it would be repurposed. And so here it's repurposed for picnic shelters, really opening it up. It is predominantly rebuilt in order to make this happen. But it allows us to kind of keep that footprint that encroaches a little bit into the wetlands and really apply a different use to it. The southern portion of the site, basically between the pool house and the orchard, is a really bright, open, sunny spot. And so this concept, we really use that space and we create a playscape and sensory garden. So that allows us that universal play experience. And then we use trellis and the building and other kinds of uses to help separate it a little bit more from that pool house. And then the parking is extended a little bit more up down the side. What that allows us to do is to get better accessibility for parking around the barn itself and have a little bit more active use, a little easier access to that barn, and then also have an emergency turnaround and drop off area that's a little bit closer to the northern portion of the site. Let's go to concept 3. So this one we're calling Playful Space for Everyone. And really the idea here, and the little orange bubbles kind of highlights this, is the idea is to really bring play in different types of play, different ages of play, different experiences of play even for our 4-legged friends with our off-leash dog area option, and use what's already at Big Rock, but also what we can enhance by Beaton Hill and Big Rock South to create that playful experience and really get the variety of play throughout the system. What that means for Beaton Hill is the off-leash area. So this one is predominated by the off-leash area in the center in that orange space. There is an alternative. We can use this as an open lawn instead. So keep that in mind. It does in that central portion of the site. So we do have flatter topography that we can use. We bring in 4 pickleball courts. The biggest difference between 2 courts and 4 courts is 4 courts starts to allow you to have more league play, a little bit more social gathering around the play, actually kind of schedule some events around pickleball. And we're using pickleball both because it was brought up as part of the community, but also it's really a rising trend that you see and a need within the city as a whole. We wanted to show an option that removed all parking off of Southeast 8th entirely. And so what we're basically doing here is using Southeast 8th as a drop-off area. We could still integrate some ADA parking within that space as more parallel or as part of that drop-off experience. But we pull all of that parking then into Beaton Hill itself. And so we have the larger parking lot that just basically parallels Southeast 8th, but contained entirely within the site. That leaves us with a smaller parking and drop-off area up at the north end of the site as well. We still have plenty of picnic, all the trails throughout, and then some play areas as well. But the play areas in this concept is a little bit more scattered, so you can have different types and different characters of play and a little bit more of an experience of coming and moving through the park to get to those different types of play areas. As we move to Big Rock Park Southpin, again, similar to previous concepts, you see the disc golf course, you see the trail system that remains throughout all of the forested areas and the wetlands, the paved trail systems that create various loops around the open lawn. So we still have that flexible open lawn space where the meadow currently sits. And then if we zoom in, You start to see the connectivity of those trail systems. And in this case, we pulled in a pea patch into that bright sunny space that we have between the pool house and the apple orchard. And the parking, we were able to really think about in this option, how can we maximize parking in that corner without spilling into the rest of the site? Still allowing some ADA access and parking directly for the barn, but really trying to pull everything else back into that corner. And that gives us parking and drop-off space. This is the option where we remove both the old garage, so that's that building that's closest to the pond, as well as the residence. And we took that step for two reasons. One, it gives us a really broad open experience when you do arrive. It gives us the ability to really have a true universal play, sensory garden, kind of significant space in the heart of this park. And it also, those are the two buildings that are going to be the most kind of challenging to reuse. Basically, the site as it currently floods, and all these options we would have and have looked at opportunities to reduce flooding and adjust grading and topography. This gives us the most option to do that. The barn, the old garage is what currently gets flooded the most and sits within the buffer for that central pond wetland. But the residence does actually, the basement does flood as well. So it's just something to think about and how much space and what that does to open up the park experience if both of those buildings are removed. So the barn and the pool house remain. They're both used for meetings and events. And then the new restroom you can see being integrated into the site as well. All of the same kind of gardens and nature gardens and pollinator gardens would still kind of be integrated in and throughout the site. We have a little bit more opportunity to integrate it more with that universal play experience. So we get lots of ages and interests and abilities. And then you can see how everything is interconnected with the trail system. That is a lot to cover. It's 3 concepts of 3 parks. So if there are, maybe this is a good time to pause and ask any questions. And I'm going to prompt you with the discussion of what we want to actually ask. So let's kind of maybe start with the discussion points, and then we can see if there's any questions or we want to jump straight into the discussion. We're going to ask you about your comments and thoughts on the Beaton Hill Park and Big Rock Park South. And what we'd like to do is think about kind of organizing this and structuring this in the way of thinking about which concept feels like it best fits the goals, which concept best fits the hopes and dreams that you had for Beaton Hill Park and Big Rock Park South. And then we'd like to talk a little bit about what you like most or maybe like least about some of those different concepts. I guess before we launch into the discussion, are there any questions or clarifications on any of the concepts or the content that we've talked about so far?
So you have a
I did have a question. How many parking spots exist currently at Big Rock Park North?
You know, that's a good question. I don't have it off the top of my head. Shelby, do you remember off the top?
I believe it's around 18.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Dina has her hand up as well.
Yes, I was curious about being able to integrate one whimsical, one playful, can we mix and match a variety of different concepts within the one?
Absolutely.
Okay, because if Beaton works well one way and Big Rock works well with a different concept, that's.
Yep. And that's kind of why we wanted to think about not just like which concept do you like best, but which concept fits each park best, so that you can think about Whimsy maybe fits Big Rock South great, but maybe you like a different concept for Beaton Hill. At the end of the day, we would expect to mix and match. And I think there can be elements from all the concepts that get integrated into the site. We will take a step to think about, you know, if we really want a concept that has you know, keeps the court on the south, how many courts do we really need in the north? And so there is some kind of companion discussion between all of the park sites that we need to think about. But I think at this stage, we really just want to hear what you like and don't like, regardless of which concept it might be under.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jill, go ahead.
So the question I have right now is, so we're not looking at finances or how much any of this would cost?
Not as a driving force for the discussion at this point. We did take an early look at just kind of more or less cost and comparing them amongst each other. I think parking is kind of driving some of those costs, of which options have more or less cost, or for example, in Beaton Hill North, kind of grading out a flatter area for a larger open lawn has some cost implications with walls. We don't see anything that is super significant between the various concepts that would stand out to really make one much more expensive. I think kind of how we use and reuse the buildings also has some cost implications. So we're starting to look at that now, but we're hoping it's not really a driver of the discussion yet.
Any other thoughts? I have a question. How big are the P patches in each one of these proposals? We have a very serious service deficit in that area.
Yeah, I think we have a bigger opportunity for a P patch in the option where we show it in Beaton Hill Park. That is, if you look in comparison, it is as big, if not bigger, than the one that it would be in the Commons, and some opportunity to scale. Obviously, you know, at this early stage, we can look by comparison if we need the same amount or we don't need quite as much. Big Rock Park South would be smaller than what is currently in the Commons. They're just that we are kind of tucking it into that open lawn area on the south end. And I think it's, we've heard it's important to really try and keep those the apple orchard. So that affects kind of the size of the pea patch that would fit in that space.
So how many spots are we talking about then? One versus the other?
I'd have to come back to you with that.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah, Beaton Hill is about twice the size of Big Rock as it's currently shown.
Okay, all right. I have another question is that you've mentioned that you're lowering the vegetation on the roadside on Southeast 8th as a suggestion. And we also noticed when we did our site visit, there's quite a lot of heavy duty tall vegetation. What is that stuff called? Anyway, the tall vegetation. Then there's also a road on the other side, which if we took that out would give us significantly more space. Did you have any consideration there?
I think we're talking about northeast, the 20th for Big Rock Park South. Yeah, the Laurel Hedge. Yeah. In all of these concepts, we really do feel that that Laurel Hedge needs to be removed. Even if you significantly cut it back, it is kind of a constant. It grows very fast and becomes a constant view blockage and maintenance. So the idea that we're proposing in all of these concepts is to really remove that significant portion of that hedge and replace it with something that is more low growing. So you're thinking of like, usually it's about 33 feet or so for most of it. In some cases, it might get a little bit taller to get some variety and interest, but enough that you can see into it. And that does give you some more open space. The open space is a little bit limited. It's not as much as you might expect. On the side that we show parking, we have a number of trees that we don't want to necessarily remove all of. So the hedge kind of, there's only so much usable space. You don't really gain by that, but you still have that screen of trees. And then on the south side, you have, what would be the west side, you have the apple orchard. So without removing the apple orchard, you're not really gaining a significant amount of like open space, for example, for programming activities, but it will feel a lot more open.
Anyone else with other comments?
Cheryl and then Miss Dina.
Two questions from my memory. That one of the parks with Beaton has the parking where the pea patch would be. If you move the parking up.
Yes, there is exactly that. One option uses the pea patch adjacent to Southeast 8th. And the other option, and the parking is then moved to the central portion of the site. And another option, we don't have a pea patch, so we look at parking along and just off of Southeast 8th.
It says that from Kent Trina saying something, he would like the person to stop sharing her screen, the presenter. Maybe I don't know what he wants.
It'll be a little easier to see people and see hands if we can and see all the squares with everybody's faces in it as opposed to the discussion. I think we can stop sharing screen. That's
We don't have any video at this time, unless that changed from earlier.
Is Dina next? Or Cheryl? Cheryl, I have to say that I'm with you. I'm struggling in that as we're being asked to make this suggestions for the plans, we can't see them. So
Right,
we
it's
really,
hard.
I don't know, but my memory is not strong enough to
Well, I'm
follow
having trouble
three
with my memory
concepts
too, but
parks.
I just remember.
So I honestly, quite frankly, I honestly have no idea what to say.
I think what we'd like to do when we move in the discussion is we can kind of go back to those plan views and just kind of do a quick high level. Here's this concept. What do we, what is it that you like or what strikes you as really good about this concept? Or what strikes you as not so working so well. And then we can kind of move through those concepts that way.
That would be excellent.
Yep.
Agreed, everyone?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Are there any
So-
other just general broad questions? I know Miss Dina had your hand up still.
Yes, I'm curious about the impact that taking those laurel hedges down to nothing, even if you put up something that is like a box hedge that goes up 3 feet, how's that going to affect the homes that are protected from now what's going to be a used piece of property, a constant day use piece of property? Is there anything that's in place to help keep those homes having some shielding from all of that, the noise, the activity, all of that is going to be increased to them now?
I think that's a great concept. And then that's something that is a concern. We can continue to look at that as we go into the preferred concept. Right now, we're showing more visibility, but I think there's certainly opportunities to balance that if we went a little too far in the open visibility. So I appreciate those types of comments.
Great, thank you.
Okay, not seeing any more hands. If we maybe want to scroll back to the first concept, we'll just kind of take them from the beginning of concept 1.
And Juliet, I can share my screen and I have each plan pulled up where people can see the notes that I'm typing for
That sounds
feedback.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shelby, I will stop sharing then and let you share if that
Yes,
works.
that's great. Thank you.
I'm going to say I do still see 2 little comments in the chat. Okay, it looks like we've handled them. Great. All right, so this first concept with Beaton Hill is the one we called gradient. We have the parking along Southeast 8th reconfigured, but kind of maximized to the extent we can with
I'm
still
sorry,
having
we
a
still
swing around.
can't see anything to make any
Oh.
comment.
We can see it online.
We cannot see it here in the, we just have the agenda up.
1 second.
Okay, we are all set. Sorry about that.
Great.
Shelby, really quick, maybe if we can flip through since we're on Beaton Hill, if you can just flip through Beaton Hill for the 3 concepts, just so you see them kind of quickly. We don't quite side by side, you can't see them anymore, but I wanted to just show you all 3 for Beaton Hill. And then the last one. And then let's go back to the first one and we'll just allow some comments and discussion. So what we're really looking for is how well does this fit with the overall goals and what do you like best or least about this concept? Can we see it in the room yet?
Melanie
I think
has
it's
her.
very well thought out. And it offers something for everybody. It has a very nice size pea patch, which is good for that particular area since it's somewhat farther away from the other parks that are around and it's going to be built up in that area. So that works well.
Melanie and Cheryl also have their hands up.
I like that this doesn't have a lot of parking. I'm mixed on how much parking we should have. I didn't really like the view of lots of concrete and parking. I like that this, back to Cheryl's comment about cost. I like that this seems to less is more. And I, as a finance person, I personally would like to have like a range of costs associated with this as well. But I like the pea patch. I like the size of the pea patch. I kind of like the open lawn, but I'm mixed between open lawn pickleball. I don't have a strong opinion, but I like the less is more on here.
Right.
Yeah, just echoing the comments about the pea patch. I think whether it ends up on Beaton Hill or Big Rock Park South, I think it is very important that we do provide pea patch space. As Nancy mentioned, that's a demonstrated community need. And if we're getting twice the size here as Big Rock Park South, it would seem to make sense that we do try to site it at Beaton Hill Park. For something I dislike, maybe the boardwalk that goes to the wetland area. I think in some of the discussions we had in Klahani Park, we also talked about boardwalk through sensitive areas, and the decision was made, maybe that's not the direction we go because it encourages people to, it does provide an educational opportunity, but it does increase degradation of that site. So maybe we don't go in that direction here.
Anyone else here?
I see
I
Miss
would-
Dina has a hand up.
I have another comment also.
Oh,
Go ahead,
Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Yeah.
I agree that I like less parking. And I like the fact that the parking stays on Southeast 8th, so that gives you room for the pea patch. One of the things we haven't talked about that I know some groups within the city would like a greenhouse. And I haven't seen that. Would that be something that could be placed here also?
Okay.
So I guess question is, where's the greenhouse if we're going to have one?
I think it is something we would have to consider a little further. We have not thought too much through a greenhouse on this particular site. There's certainly some opportunity for space with some extra, grading and topography that we have through here. It is not terribly feasible on Big Rock South. It's kind of a single dedicated use that becomes a little problematic. I think there is potentially some more opportunities here if it's still a program that is desired.
And I like the amount of pea patch because I think we really have to expand our pea patch capability for the city because people want one and there's nothing available much.
I will also say, because we do have topography on this site, it's probably not a super flat pea patch. It would likely be a little bit terraced, but it could still be accessible.
I would like to make a comment. I had envisioned a dog park on this site. It felt like it was more in keeping the character of the site. And I envisioned the pea patch down at Big Rock South in keeping with sort of the agrarian character of that site. And think there might be other locations besides what you suggested near the apple orchards for a pea patch on what is essentially the farm site for the Piggott property.
Okay.
So I'm disappointed I'm disappointed there's not a dog park on this site.
And the third concept, we have a dog park on this site.
Yeah, I know. That's what
Okay.
we asked, what I don't like about this plan.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Miss Stina, did you have a comment?
I do. I am not a big fan of the turnaround going into Big Rock Park North, although I get that it's necessary. But is there a way that that could, what's really going to be the impact of that? Also, if you wanted to do the greenhouse, I think putting that with the pea patch is two different types of gardening. So I think that integrating that as a dual concept in that space would not be a bad idea. I personally would like to see this concept that we have exactly as it is, with that open space being a dog park, because we don't have one outside of Beaver Lake ball fields, which is not always easy to get to, because if people are playing ball, there's no ability to get there or park there. You'd have to walk for a longer time than you would have the energy to do at the park after the walk. So putting that in this schematic and this option would be really, really nice, because you've got all of the play area for kids across on Big Rock Park North. So families can have dual experiences, still keeping an eye on each other, and everybody gets to be free to roll around and have a good time. So I think that that would be really nice in this version with the rest of the things you have here.
Okay, I believe unless we could move on to the second proposed plan, or
Nancy,
unless
if I
people have more comments to make on this.
Nancy, if I could just speak to the greenhouse for a moment. Just for everybody's information, we did prepare a budget decision package that will go to council for a placeholder for a greenhouse somewhere in the city park system. One of the things, as we consider a greenhouse, we also need to think about the different user groups that would utilize that, and then how that would be managed. It needs to be located in a location where it makes sense for the different user groups, and that there's space both in the greenhouse and outside of the greenhouse for plant storage, and there's security and all of those sort of items. So we are putting that forward as a decision package to our council. And whether it's in either the Big Rock South or Beaton Hill or some other location within the city, we are requesting that we be able to move forward with something somewhere.
Thank you for that background, Kevin.
And I do see Cheryl's hand up.
Kevin, just another thought with the dog park, which I understand, but if you have the pea patch gravity right now it's a hillside, right? So the dog excrement and etc. Wouldn't it kind of drift down into the pea patch?
The way you would need to design dog parks now, you do create systems to kind of channel and funnel stormwater, so that water would not just sheet flow straight down the hill. So there's a collection or a group of strategies that you would use to help offset that, as well as just pure space, right? Just allowing plenty of space between the two uses.
Can we move on to the next concept for Beaton Hill, please?
So let's stick with Beaton Hill and go to concept 2 for Beaton Hill. This is the one that had 2 pickleball courts, integrated the amphitheater, and then started to have a smaller parking area in the central part of the site.
Comments?
I can. So I like that we have an amphitheater. That seems like an interesting feature that our park system maybe doesn't provide. I don't know what the size of that would be or what kind of events that could support, but maybe like a Shakespeare in the Park kind of function. I do like that we have pickleball courts, additional parking. I know it's not super popular or exciting, but I think especially with the treehouse and Big Rock Park Central, we are going to want kind of as much parking as we can get on these 2 sites. What I don't like, it seems like between options 1 and 2, the pea patch has essentially the same footprint as that middle lawn area. So I wonder if there's a way to kind of overlay that, but as it is, this concept doesn't have a pea patch.
Okay. Sid, are you suggesting that you would like a pea patch in both places?
So I would like so for concept one, that kind of green lawn area right there is where the pea patch was. So if we could just kind of stick the pea patch from option one in the same space.
Yeah, so we like this concept, but you'd prefer to see the pea patch brought into this concept.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I saw Melanie's hand and Miss Dina's hand.
Yeah, I'll disagree with Sid. I actually don't like the amphitheater. It just seems, I don't remember even talking about an amphitheater. So that's my concept, and this doesn't have as much parking as the third option, but so this is probably, this might be a compromise on the parking, but it still seems to have a lot of parking.
I'd like to agree with Sid on the amphitheater. I grew up in Mercer Island. We went to that amphitheater all the time. That's over in Luther Burbank Park. It's a phenomenal city resource. I think we don't have anything like that here in Sammamish. It would be really nice to see some of the events moved over from Pine Lake Park into this amphitheater space. And I think we do need to have enough parking to support the use. And I think that's one thing that we consistently underbuild is the parking. We've got a growing population and not everybody's going to walk. So I think, minimally we need this middle concept for parking, especially if you're going to put events in there. Also, I was kind of on the fence about the boardwalk, but I missed the boardwalk. I think we're missing access through that whole corner of the park without it. And I understand that it's going to impact the wetlands, but that makes the whole wetland side of the park unusable. And it's one of my favorite things about kind of Lower Evans Creek is those beautiful punch-in boardwalks. Just gives you different access and a different view of different environment. I don't know, I'd like to see some boardwalk through there.
One thing I can offer just to kind of as a little bit of an aside, I think the comment previously was, in Klahani Park, the boardwalks were intentionally removed and all access was removed. The bog at Klahani Park is it's a much different and much more pristine environment, right? It's a very hard to replace. It's just a much more kind of developed habitat around it. Here, it is a wetland. It is still classified as a wetland. If you go out there today, what you see is a pond and a meadow. So there is a lot of work to be done to really bring that wetland up to what you would sort of expect to have as a character and a truly natural, healthy ecosystem for a wetland. So it does, I think, give a little bit more opportunity. There's lots of mitigation. There's lots of improvement that wants to happen to these wetlands, connectivity to the stream, a more fully developed sort of system of water moving through the site. And that could give us some opportunity to bring in some boardwalks and still use that enhancement as part of the mitigation.
Miss Dina and then Cheryl.
Yes, thank you. I would like to echo that I think the amphitheater would be very well used. I think that the Shakespeare in the Park plays in the park, kids activities that could be done, and theater is really, really vibrant. I've seen a couple of different shows myself, and all of the parks are full from one end to the other. So I do think that it would get a lot of use. Absolutely. I would like to agree with Sid on putting the pea patch back in to some of that green area so that it could be mixed use. You could still walk around pea patches. So I don't think it would take away too much space. I really do like the pickleball court, but I also like the concept that you said about having 4 courts allows them to do tournaments. And I think that it would be a shame to make that much of an effort for pickleball if we couldn't let people have a true pickleball season out of it. So I like the concept of the pickleball as well. My question that I'd like to get, besides just the comments on like or dislike, I would like to know, is it possible for us to take the parking and break it up so that we can still have it be integrated with trees and natural, and we can put parking a little bit more throughout with less impact. And then my final real quick is I like the idea of the boardwalks if it doesn't negatively impact the wetlands. But what could we possibly do about parking to mitigate the impact of the parking, but also give us more parking?
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment about the restroom. I feel the restroom is misplaced here. That it should go between the parking and the amphitheater in that little nook there, because right now it's way off in the corner by itself. It's not in the active area. If you're playing pickleball, you have to hike way up to the top to go to the,
Yep.
yeah. So I think it should go more, the restroom should be more centrally located.
Okay.
I have a question about the amphitheater. How big of an amphitheater are we actually talking about? Is this gonna fit 100 people, or are we talking more like 15 or?
I think as we move, if it's a concept that we do want to continue to explore in the preferred alternative, the size of it is something that you can use to really help determine how much noise and how much impact and how much parking you might need. And so I think our initial thoughts are that it does stay a smaller size. Right
What do
now
you
it's
mean by
drawn
smaller?
more like 50 to 70 feet across. So you're not talking hundreds of people. You're probably, we'd have to kind of come back with sizes, but I think you'd be in the under 100, not so much over 100. And the parking will just limit how many people you would use, would kind of limit the size of the use for it.
All right, in the interest of time, and we've got more to look at, let's look at the concept 3 for Beaton Hill Park.
I see a hand from Miss Tina.
Yeah, regarding this particular version, I think the parking doesn't negatively impact because the park is different use than just everybody maybe doing grass angels in, because you've got larger pickleball, because you've got the off-leash dog area, because you're doing these walking trails in and throughout. I think that the parking doesn't really negatively impact the space being put in there. I do think it would still be nice if there was any version of a pea patch in this as well, though.
Okay.
Other comments? I would again like to say, I think the restroom is misplaced.
It's
I'm not, I hate to be
way
obsessed
over
about
there.
this, but I have 2 little granddaughters now, and I'm trying to imagine running from the pickleball courts up to the bathroom there, particularly in
This is
view of the,
tricky because the other option is you go across the street to the one that would be in Big Rock North.
there isn't
But
one
yes,
there,
I think
though.
we struggled
There
with
isn't
that
one
as well.
There's not one there, so. If we're going to add one, it should be centrally located, even more towards the south, because there's not one currently really at Big Rock Central.
And I'm kind of inferring from that is if we do put one more to the south, then you might not need the one that was originally planned for Big Rock North, because you wouldn't necessarily need the 2 quite so close together. Okay.
This is my favorite.
Yeah, this one is mine as well.
I
I
don't
wish it was a
like
pea
those-
patch though.
Whoops, where are you?
Go
We're
ahead,
missing, we're
Cheryl.
missing the pea patch, unless we can have a bigger pea patch at Big Rock South. It kind of depends on your concepts of how things should be. Should you aggregate parking? Should you aggregate a pea patch? Or should you spread these things out? That's just, in terms of parking, I'm one for, let's get it over with. Let's get it, I mean, we have to have trees around it and things, but if we spread parking all over the place, we've got more ingresses and egresses, which creates safety hazards. So just maybe a difference in philosophy.
Cheryl and then Melanie.
I don't like the fact that there's new pea patch here and that the parking takes it takes the area, that would be good pea patch.
Okay. Then I think Melanie was next.
I think I agree. I like this one as well. It's probably my favorite, but I think I might add, based on what was said for the second one. I mean, this might be an opportunity to have the boardwalk through the wetlands.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's no pea patch. I would kind of agree with that, but I guess it's the question would be, where's the best place between here and south, and to put the biggest pea patch. That might be what we have to look at.
Okay.
I still think that's a lot of parking, but I'm slowly coming to the fact that we probably need a parking lot like that for both Beaton and Big Rock North.
Mistina?
So this takes the parking away from the street altogether. As Melanie alluded to, this would be the entire amount of parking for both parks.
It would be, although you'll see when we said the drop off or angled on-street parking, you could still get, a good 10 to stalls or more in this option along Southeast 8th if we wanted to.
Oh, great. Okay. You can put me down for this being one of my favorites as well. I guess one of three, but yeah. And real quick, the reason you did the bathrooms the way you did is because you are looking at putting in a bathroom north, and then you want to put one at the top of Beaton. So that you've got one on basically
exactly.
either end.
Exactly. All of the concepts assume, because there's a bathroom in the master plan for Big Rock North, that there would be a bathroom eventually placed in Big Rock North. Therefore, the restroom, rather than, the alternative that we kind of debated back and forth, was just taking one bathroom only between the two park sites. And if you do assume there's only one bathroom for both parks, then you would want to make it more centrally located around. In this case, you'd put it by the parking in the pickleball court.
Yep. Okay. I kind of like the idea of both, because again, if you're then at the top of the park, you're going to have to run all the way down to the bottom, to where the big set of bathrooms is. And I know it's not a huge piece of property, but when you are in need of going, you're in need of going. So I do like the idea of having two options, especially when it can get really busy in a park, with moms having to take their kids in and help them and all that good stuff,
Okay.
All right, let's move on to Big Rock.
I just want to
Oh,
question
Cheryl, I'm
how
sorry,
much parking we really need if you have 4 courts of pickleball, and if you have a dog park, do you need 50 parking spaces?
If you consider that you're
dog park
also
isn't very big.
Yeah. So if you consider, it's a little bit smaller than what is at Beaver Lake. So for scale wise, it's maybe half, maybe a little bit more than half that size. So you're talking, 15, 20 people probably could easily be in the off leash area, another 16 in the pickleball courts if they're full, another 10 to 20 between play areas, and another 5 or so wandering on trails, for example. And you quickly come to a good 50 people, not including who could potentially be at Big Rock North. I think lack of parking limits how much you would potentially use the parks. But I would say that it's not overly sized. If there was truly a kind of a maximum bright sunny 4th of July day, and everyone was really out trying to use these two parks combined.
I think especially makes sense since we're losing the off-street parking, right?
And in this option, yes.
The on-street parking, that's all being eliminated.
Now, if you keep some of the on-street parking, but like this location for off-street parking, we could adjust the size accordingly, for example. So there is that mix and match function. It doesn't have to be all one or the other. We could reduce the parking size of the parking lot on the park site if we keep as much of that on-street parking as we can, and then kind of reevaluate how much parking we need based on a preferred concept. Ultimately, we will do some occupancy and some loading and kind of right-size the parking as part of that preferred concept.
So does anyone want to voice a preference for on-street versus off-street parking?
I liked the idea of keeping what we can and minimizing the additional that I guess keeping what we can and minimizing the additional that we build, and don't build more than we need.
Well, we have to be careful. We are growing. So if we're going to include more people into the community, we're going to need the parking to be part of that. I know up in that area people would be a little close to walking, but if this becomes a viable opportunity of a park, because let me just give an example. The Beaver Lake off-leash dog park is set behind the Beaver Lake ball fields. There's 2 or 3 ball fields there. But as soon as one group of people goes to play ball, that's 2 hours of nobody else being able to park in that parking lot. And there's never enough parking. But the reason that is impactful is because there's also really no parking in the surrounding neighborhoods to get to our parks. So it's a really long haul if you want to try to park somewhere other than the parking that's allotted to the park. So I don't think that, and to Juliet's point, I think she's right about the concept of as soon as you start getting active use of the dog park, you've got the pickleball and you've got people walking on the park. Now this is also parking for across the street park. That's going to be filling up really, really fast. So it better we plan now, I think, than be stuck later. Unless everybody wants to do my elevated parking idea, then we don't have to have this discussion. That would be great. So
I like the idea of getting it off the street. I would hate to see kind of what happens with families down at the landing and kids and wagons being toted along the road. That's a busy road. I like getting it off the street. I think that's safer. And I know as a mom of 3 kids who had a husband who traveled a ton and I was always by myself, like the idea of getting 3 kids out on the side of the road is terrifying. So as much as we can get this parking into the park, I just think it's safer for families. And that's, mostly, and the dogs getting in and out of the cars. If we've got the dog park there, I don't like seeing that on the side of the road either. So I like the idea of having it in there. And I don't think 45 spots is excessive for what we've got for activities in this park.
I would like to remind, see if we can't move along to Big Rock. Just because to be a little bit conscious of time. And 3 more parks, 3 more concepts
we're
to
ready to
get
move
through.
on. We're ready to move on, everyone? Yes, moving on.
Awesome. Okay,
And
let's
then-
quickly, I'm
Julia,
sorry.
hold on 1 sec. Just the one thing is to remind everybody too, that this is not your only opportunity to give feedback. We will be returning in September on the 13th with this same content. So keep the wheels turning and there will be another opportunity to give feedback.
Shelby, will these be posted online so we can spend more time
Yes.
studying them? Okay,
Yes, they
and
will
when
be
when
posted.
will they be posted?
I'm trying to get this PowerPoint this week and if anything next week ahead of the public event.
Fabulous.
I also emailed out the PowerPoint to you all, so you should have that for your review if you needed.
I think
Yes,
everyone
I
would
saw
like to
that
spend more
earlier.
time.
Thank
I think
you.
everyone would like to spend more time with it and think about it some more.
Yeah.
Okay,
And-
everyone.
Shelby
Heads
sent it
nodding,
out
heads nodding.
today.
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
And then just one other reminder, I know that the P-patch has been something that everybody is very excited about. And just a reminder too, that our master plan for Klahani Park also has a community garden noted in the final master plan, and that has about 45 plots in it.
Just remember also, we have 160 people on the waiting list for, I mean, we just have such a service deficit. It's really surprising and wonderful news that everyone wants to garden, so.
All right. I think for just the purpose of moving this all along, I'd like to focus in on the south end of these areas and some of the distinctions. So some of the greatest distinctions is the orientation and kind of the quantity of parking is somewhat similar in each of these, although not quite the same. The removal of the old garage and the residence, I think is kind of a good point of discussion, whether that does enough to open up the site, or if the value of keeping those buildings is more valuable than the benefit of kind of what we gain by removing those two buildings. And then, if there's just kind of general, a lot of the trails and the kind of whimsical elements and the education along the trails is fairly similar between all three concepts. The P patch, since we kind of talked about it, if you want to quickly flip through the three concepts, that open space really seemed kind of the most prominent. There is definitely some opportunities up around the barn is very open. It seems like it's a great place to have your P patch, except that you start to get into the wetland buffer. Not that that's impossible, but kind of between the barn and the old and the newer garage, numbers 1 and 3 certainly is a sunny open spot that could be considered. It's not as big as that lawn area in the south. And then the only other spot on the site that really lends itself would be more that open meadow, which is kind of focused more inward to the site. So in the first one, so let's just quickly go to the first one again, just to kind of highlight. First one, we remove only the old garage and have that open space and have more the elements and playful elements along the trail. And the second option, we keep all of the buildings and have the playful element more in the southern lawn. So in this option, your P patch would want to be in Beaton Hill. And then in the third option, we kind of consolidate parking, whereas the second option, we sort of extended it along. So it's a little maybe less visually impactful, and we have the P patch in that southern area. So we remove both the residence and the old garage to really have a much more kind of integrated playful space. Do you want to, let's flip back maybe to the first one and we'll start at the beginning again.
Oh boy, this is tough.
Lots of hands went right up.
I think I saw Melanie's first and then Cheryl and then Miss Dina.
I think I'm torn between this one and option 3, but then right as I was about to say something, then I saw the comment on this one that says existing nature trail removed, but I think that
is the case in all of them. And the only reason that one portion of a trail is removed is so to not conflict with the disc golf, because you can't have a disc golf hole that extends a trail. So it's just a small segment of a trail that's removed. And then you see that brown line to the north, we're replacing it by creating a new connection up in that area.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
So just that leads me, sorry, I didn't ask this question before. So if I'm a walker going through this on the trails, am I gonna I'm looking for a quiet, solitary walk through these trails, am I gonna be disturbed by the disc golf?
So when we looked out at the site, there's a lot of ability and space to keep some distance. So you've got like a good 20, 30 feet before you have any holes from where your trail is. What happens is they access the tee off of a trail, but then they kind of are able to sort of wander through the forest to get to the hole. So they're basically walkers with a disc, right? And when they're off the trail on the course, they're throwing in a different direction than where you're walking, and then they go onto the trail and move on to the next one. So it's typically a fairly low impact to trail users. Having said that, with a disc golf course here, you will certainly see more trail users because you don't really have a disc golf course anywhere. So it is an activity that I could see bringing more people to the park. Yeah,
I would say, I probably like the disc golf I know we wanted a disc golf, but I say I never envisioned that it would be here on Big Rock South at all. But that's my comment about that. I like the fact, I'm torn between these because I like the fact that we were removing both the old garage and the house. I actually like that idea when it was presented. But obviously this needs a P patch on here if we're gonna. So I think I probably like the third one more than this one, but
And that
those are
P
my,
patch could easily come back into this concept.
yes.
Because the space is just an open lawn. So there is definitely opportunity to bring that P patch in here or also up in kind of the northern part of the barn.
Yep.
Okay.
Cheryl?
Yes. First of all, I don't like the disc golf here either. I think it belongs more on the property between North and on Central. Because I think there's a better spaces there for the disc golf. I think people moving in this, I wouldn't want a Frisbee to come sailing by my head. So I see it more of a quiet place to walk through. I like the fact that there's less parking on this actual plan. And I love the fact that the house is still there, because I think what I heard so much from people is that there's no meeting spaces like for small groups in the whole city. So I think we can use that house for some meeting space. And also it's a beautiful house. It would be a shame to tear it down. In terms of the old bar, I mean, the old
Garage, the old garage.
Yeah, I'm mixed on that.
Okay.
And it'd be nice to have some pea patch maybe in the open lawn by the barn. I don't know whether you can do that or not, but.
To the north of the barn, it'd be difficult to do it in the wetland without a whole lot of permitting and work.
Oh,
But
no,
there are
no, you don't
definitely,
want to do
there are
that.
definitely opportunities up around the barn that we could look at further. I think there was, I can't quite tell, was it Miss Dina that's
Dina?
next?
Yep. Yeah, so on this particular one, if you were going to put a P patch up on the open lawn, I think that it would make sense that the parking lot would have to extend up a little bit farther, because people are going to be bringing a lot of things in and out. It's not at their home. So unless there's a shed that's built there as well to hold all the soils and the tools you need, the wheelbarrow, et cetera, this parking lot would fall short to that. With that being said, I prefer the idea of a smaller lot like in 3, and I like the idea of taking out both buildings. I agree that the house is wonderful, but if it's harder for it to be maintained and it's also very musty and smelly, I don't know that it's very healthy for people to spend time in there. Could we build something else that would be usable for small gatherings in that same footprint, but be able to be newer and a little more feasible to be utilized, as opposed to these odd broken out rooms, and the having to make sure nobody goes up the stairs or et cetera. So I do like the idea that the house and that the 2 buildings are gone. And I have to say, after hearing everybody else's comments, I think I'm on the same page about the disc golf. I'd like there to be disc golf somewhere, but much like trying to walk your dog on a path where there's tons of bicycles, it doesn't work very well when somebody's playing that much of a speed activity and you're not at that same activity level. There could be some just crossover that isn't as enjoyable for both sides, like getting beamed in the noggin with a ill-flown Frisbee. So I think that I can agree on the disc golf. And I think that it would be nice if we were able to add in something like the pea patches here, but also keep that parking lot small.
Okay. Got it. Are there other comments on this one? Or are we ready to move on?
Moving on.
Let's move on. All right, so here we keep.
I think we can move on, because the only comment I was going to add is I'd like to see disc golf too in the city, but I'm not sure about on this plan, the way it is currently mixing it. So I was going to agree with that one. And I'm, along with others, okay with the 2 dwellings, the residential dwelling being removed.
All right. So in this concept, I think one of the bigger differences is to really extend the parking a little bit more up to encompass access to that barn, and for a drop off and ability to kind of get a little bit more accessibility into the northern meadow open lawn area. And then of course, using that south end as more for playfulness and sensory and universal accessible play spaces rather than the pea patch.
Now I see what Cheryl was talking about, and I definitely prefer the other parking lot.
Okay.
This is a lot of parking. Or it looks like a lot, and maybe it's just because it's designed differently, but it just looks.
Yep. It does
looks like
have
a
more
lot.
stalls, but it's not a significantly more. Okay,
It seems like it's taking a thinner footprint, but a longer one.
exactly.
Because the other one had the stormwater on the other side as well, right? So I think that's where I'm sort of torn too, because I think that the use of having it go up and being thinner and getting farther into the park, I think from the usability of the reasons why you have it up there with that turnaround and drop off, I think is pretty vital for this piece of property because it's a very long piece of property. So I do and I don't like this parking. I like that it's taking up less width of a footprint and that it goes up a little higher for better access to parts of the park. I think that it does work well that way.
See a hand from Miss Dina, although it just left.
That was just me.
If we're
Okay.
talking about adding the pea patch up there on that open lawn area, then maybe this parking makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I'll second the parking making sense. I get that it's a longer footprint, but for the size of the property, I think thinking about people that have accessibility issues and might be walker or wheelchair bound, like that's a really nice way to get them up there and up to the barn and up to the pea patch.
Cheryl?
I'm wondering if there's even water access up there. You think about having to run, there's not water at the barn, right?
There is water at the barn.
Yeah.
There's no bathroom.
There's no bathroom currently.
There's a
There
kitchen.
is a sink, I believe.
There's a
There's at
kitchen
least
there
a
with
sink.
running
Yeah,
water. Yeah, there's a kitchen.
yeah.
But I don't know whether, the point is whether you can, it's going to be expensive to bring water up in here, I would think, but I guess.
The barn is plumbed. I mean, there was a sink in there, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's already water.
And we didn't talk about barn accessibility. How are you going to deal with the barn?
So the barn, the upper level would be primarily again for storage. Well, it's a very nice space. In order to occupy the space, the code would require both a lift as well as a secondary means of emergency egress. So we'd have to integrate a stair. That starts to get, well, it's not impossible, it becomes very problematic. So the barn, the use of the barn would be for the meetings in the open space within just that main floor area. And the upper level could then actually, if you're going to use that barn, you need space for tables and chairs and storage and all of that kind of stuff. So that would really be what the upper area would be focused on.
So in this plan, then where are the meeting rooms, like small meeting rooms?
Smaller meeting rooms in this plan would be at the pool house number 5 and
Right, but
in
that's
the
not much-
residence
that's not
number 4.
much room there.
There would be one small meeting room,
If you're gonna
basically, I think
have
it's about
60
20.
Sorry, if you're gonna have 60 to 100 people, but you don't want to use the barn because that's got other events. Or if you want to have groups, I'm thinking of meeting spaces so that you can have more than one event going on. That's why I hate to get rid of the residents,
Mhm.
because we need meeting places.
There is one other thing I should mention is when we start to look at the occupancy, and I think you brought this up, Cheryl, in your comment, the pool house is more like in that 20-ish range. It's definitely the smallest of the meeting space sizes. The residence does have some capacity, and depending on how we kind of shift the interior of the spaces to get closer to that 30 to 50-ish range. The barn, of course, has the largest capacity. In all of these options, the parking is what is the most limiting factor. So we do start to see opportunities for some overflow potentially on the meadow as a potential, or I think as mentioned in the past, if you do a partnership with the temple across the street, as it currently sits without some other partnership overflow opportunity, you could not realistically program all of the building spaces all at the same time to their maximum occupancy. You simply wouldn't have the ability to park. So that's a little bit to think about when we think about those buildings all remaining. You will have some ability to program, but you would need to stagger and really think about the capacity of those events if they're going to happen at the same time.
Miss Dina, did you have something?
I did. If we wanted to create meeting spaces that are more viable, the barn could easily get an interior separation system that we could put together so that you could block it off and it could be 2 sets of 50 or whatever, or block it off so there's 4 meeting rooms in there. So we could set the barn up to do a little bit more than just be one large open space. So that might solve some of that issue. And then also, I'm sorry that I am missing this to ask, but it says number 2 is the restroom. Where would you put the restroom? This is just so small. I'm not seeing where number 2 is.
Yeah, so basically it'd be at the kind of right at the other end of the pool house. The pool house has a small meeting room. You'd basically, the idea here is you'd basically create a trellis or some sort of way to architecturally connect a new restroom so it feels a little bit more integrated into that space. It's close to the play area and close enough to the rest of the gardens to be pretty centrally located.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay.
Sid has a comment.
Yeah, so I think one thing I do like about this this option is like in the concept art, opening up the old garage to maybe have like a patio space or a pavilion looking out over the water feature. I think that would look, I think that would get some good use. If there are flooding concerns, maybe that's not the best use of our resources. I do think that the residence is going to be challenging to make good use of. So I think the other 2 options I would probably lean towards more than this one.
Mark, did I see your light on? Okay. So isn't there a restroom already in the, I sound like I'm obsessed with this. Isn't there a restroom already in the pool house?
There is, it's not of a size and you can't modify it to be a large enough size to fit 80 accessible restrooms for the capacity of the park as we'd have it. And that's the case.
Are we
in
contemplating
all of
adding a
these.
restroom to the barn?
The restroom would the barn would be modified to include a restroom.
Okay.
The problem, if you make that a publicly accessible from the outside as well as the inside, is it becomes limiting in how you kind of use the and rent out those spaces. It's just a lot more difficult and more of a challenge for maintenance and kind of vandal resistance and keeping that large of a space accessible. So there are examples where it's used for double duty. It's more challenging. And so we have at least initially looked at a separate restroom facility. That way you can fully program a barn and still have people comfortable in using the rest of the park site.
I concur with Cheryl that we need more small meeting spaces. And I'm thinking about myself sitting in that cold barn in a meeting with 20 people on that concrete floor, shivering myself to death in the wintertime. So I just don't feel that the barn I think is event space, but it is not a good spot for small meeting space. I know that the house has tremendous challenges, maintenance wise, cost wise. And I honestly, I think it's kind of a nightmare, but it's also that front porch, sitting on that front porch in a rocking chair is very appealing. So I'm just in a quandary about the house.
I do see another hand up, and then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Maybe I didn't cut you off. Okay. I do want to be respectful of time too, as long as we do have one more concept too. So that might help further a little bit, the similar discussion onto that third concept. Ms. Dina?
Yeah, so I think that if we're going to look at spending money, I like the idea that maybe we can keep something like a porch where we can have people that can sit and watch everybody else play. So, you know, for grandparents or for folks that are physically challenged and able-wise, such as myself, that might be really nice to incorporate that. But I think I'd rather see money go into maybe retrofitting the barn so that you're not sitting there freezing, and it can be used for multiple you know, large numbers of people, but also it could be broken down and used in smaller ways where you put up, you know, you swing the walls out and you can create a climate control and make it very comfortable so that the barn is more multi-use. So, you know, especially in the winter time, I think there's not going to be the same type of gatherings as there's going to be in the summertime. So that might give you a better opportunity to have that be a multi-use meeting space. And I think I'd rather see the money spent in that direction than trying to figure out how to keep the house going.
All right, moving on to the third concept, we remove both the barn and the old garage for that central play space, which then frees up the southern lawn for the pea patch. We do focus the parking, but do have an extension, so you have ADA accessibility only for those ADA stalls near the barn. And I think for the barn versus the residence discussion, we can continue to look at options, and there are other examples of barns being used for both small and large gathering spaces. So we can look at what some of those features and opportunities could look like.
Thank you.
Is two still, oh, yeah, it is still the bathroom in this one.
Yep,
I like the bathroom placement better in this.
Okay.
In this last option.
Number two is the
Two is still
bathroom.
the bathroom, but it's moved.
I agree with the location of this bathroom.
I like this idea of taking out the house and the garage. I think the house sounds like a nightmare. It's beautiful. I'm totally in love with it too, but it sounds like a nightmare to take care of. And this would really open it up and give us a ton more room.
It's true. It's true.
I think visually this one looks the best, seems the most appealing.
And it has pea patches.
Yep.
It does. This one has the most parking stalls. Is that correct?
This one does have the most parking stalls, correct?
Okay. And just one comment. Well, I was going to start by saying I assume, but that might be a wrong assumption. I assume we're going to have bike parking as well.
Yeah, and we're not quite at the level of getting into where the bike parking would be located. Similarly with benches or picnic tables that aren't part of a shelter, all of those would still be anticipated in any of these concepts.
But they'll have the ability to, people will have the ability to ride their bikes and lock them up. Okay, that's all.
Cheryl?
I agree. This is
sorry.
probably the most appealing.
Yeah, I'm fully in agreement.
I'm back with Sid about keeping the old garage, because thinking about this, you have no spot for people to be outside with something over their head as a shelter. And you think about all the rain we get. So right now you have the pool house, but that's gonna, 20 people can fit in there. And then you have the barn but you don't really have any place for people to sit, either with the sun being really hot and they want some shade, or unless they go out and sit on it under a tree, or if it's raining.
There's 3 picnic shelters on this diagram.
We
Okay,
did
so-
actually keep a new shelter in a similar spot to where the old garage was. And if there's an interest, we could certainly expand it and make it a little bit bigger too. So the idea would be you'd still have that function here. It's just not in the exact same footprint. It allows us to shift it out of the wetland a little bit more and a little bit more space to do some topography for some flood control too.
I was just
So Cheryl, are you saying that you'd like to see that be a large shelter there where the old garage was?
Well, I'm just thinking about, if you have a group of people that want to have a meeting and they don't want to have be in the picnic shelter. I don't know how big those are. And then, and
So
those are
maybe a space
usually
for
rented
outdoor.
out. And you want to have an open view. It might seem reasonable to keep a larger footprint. I don't know what the cost is. Maybe it's prohibitive, but
So I wrote down, and Shelby, this is maybe for the notes here, really that idea that you to have a space for an outdoor meeting. So it would be large enough to support some kind of a small, you know, the smaller meeting that you might do in the residence would now have a space outdoors in one of these shelters that would be big enough, weather protected, that you could have some of that function.
Those large picnic shelters at Lake Samamra State Park are very popular, summer and winter, for events, you know, get-togethers, family reunions. I've been to memorial services and some of the ones at Lake Samamra State Park. So, and they're pretty big, you know, that you can easily fit the rotunda, and the rotunda at Grassland Park in Redmond is very popular too. So, you know, we don't have any large, Shirley, you're right, we don't have any large outdoor meeting spaces that I can think of. Do we?
Beaver Lake Park or
Hmm.
Beaver Lake Preserve area, right? Doesn't that have that open area that you can rent?
How big is it?
Beaver Lake Park has the pavilion next to the lodge. Beaver Lake Preserve doesn't have any picnic shelters.
Yeah, thank you. The next to the lodge. You know, there's something like that. You had it, didn't you have a picture initially when you showed the different options for not necessarily more than pergola, but not completely closed in barn? And I think that they were just the open air, but covered on top. Is that viable for us to put that idea in here? We've taken out 2 buildings, but yes, can we put one of those structured, covered, but open, all
Yes.
open?
Yes, that what you see as the smaller shelter in this concept in the center could easily be expanded into something a little bit larger.
That might be the way to solve everybody's concern about the extra places for us to be able to gather, which I agree. The more we could have of that, the better we'll service the residents.
And just, we didn't really focus on it, but there was a concept in Beaton Hill that also included a much larger shelter. So you could have that ability to have those larger gatherings up at the top of that hill with the views as well.
Oh, excellent.
How popular is the gathering spot, outdoor gathering spot at Beaver Lake Park? Very popular, yeah.
It's busy
Boy
whenever I
Scouts, Garden Club. I've been to lots of events and like weddings.
All of our shelters and rentals are very busy and popular. So yeah, I don't think an outdoor meeting place would go without desire.
I don't see the Beaver Lake Pavilion used much.
We rent that out for the Eastlake High School dance team annual stuff, and we rent it out a year ahead because so that we can get our pick of dates. I think it's pretty popular.
The Garden
Right,
Club
but I
has
was
a hard,
looking
yeah, the
for
Garden Club has a hard time getting in there, as does the Boy Scouts. So
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
think I love the idea of another bigger shelter. I think that's a great idea, Cheryl.
Yep, I agree.
How many people do you think will be upset about the loss of the house?
I don't know that there's a way to tell yet. Although I will say, I think we should get some really good feedback at the public workshop next week. So partnering it with the farmers market, we hope to get a lot of interest and some good feedback from that event. And in September, we'll be able to report back what we heard at that event with these 3 concepts to kind of help fine tune what we think a preferred concept should look like.
I still hear from people who tell me that they're disappointed that the house that was on the location where the YMCA is now was, why couldn't we make use of that? And as you may remember, that was in terrible, terrible condition. But people still remark about it. So I think we need to be sensitive there about how people are going to feel about that.
What is the historical value of that house.
So it has been modified enough that it does not meet criteria for any sort of historic preservation. There are parts of it that are certainly older, and some of the woodwork is obviously quite beautiful as well when you're inside, but it doesn't, and it has been modified significantly throughout the years.
I think one of the things that I think would be important is when you are having that discussion and getting feedback, that people understand the condition of the home and what's going to be required to repair it and the level of safety when you're in it, and you start maximizing, having 50 or 75 people in that house, so I think that making sure people, it's nice that everybody's got their care for making sure we're not just knocking everything down. But I also think that understanding the safety factor and the cost involved and the actual use you'd be able to get out of it versus not having it there and being able to create something that's more user friendly is important to make sure people get in the context of why you chose to take it out.
Can we have a straw poll of the number of people who on the commission who would support removal of the house?
I would support it.
I would
Sid?
support it.
I'd support it.
Anybody else?
I would support it.
I'd support it.
So it's unanimous and of the people attending.
Oh, well, it's not unanimous.
Okay, all right, Cheryl.
No, I really would like to see if there's some way we could use, there's just no meeting places for people that are smaller. Are you going to have a kitchen somewhere here to help? If people want to do food, that probably isn't it, but I think we need to think about more how we want to use this property. People talked about having camps. I don't know, as I said, I enjoy sitting out on that porch too. I understand that I like the lower level. I think it's very hard to deal with the basement or the upstairs.
It's going to break my heart, but I think about the maintenance, that roof, all of that. I don't know.
And honestly, it doesn't smell very good in there. It's very musty. It's very old. I'm not sure how healthy it is to be closed up in there, in all honesty. There's just a lot of history, and who knows if all the lead paint is gone, who knows if all of the, if there isn't any mold somewhere. Those are very intense health issues for people. And I'm not sure that you'd necessarily want to take a chance with all of the other issues with the house. I mean, if there was just one or two things, then well, let's modify it. But if it's a vast majority of things, but to your point, Cheryl, I think you're absolutely right. There should be meeting places. And although this is a parks and we're talking about what we would do with this park, let's not forget we are also looking at a senior center and a place for seniors to meet. So if we look at being able to help utilize that in other ways for meeting places, then that could offset what this park is going to do for the community of, for the city of Sammamish. So that's something I think to think about as well.
And Miss
So is
Dina,
this-
I'd like to, sorry, Cheryl, just for the interest of time, I hate to pause the conversation because I think that we're having a great conversation, but I believe
Okay.
that there are a couple other things on the docket for tonight
Oh, okay.
that we have to keep rolling, but please, I will send, if you have not seen the PowerPoint from tonight, I will resend it. And please keep thinking about some comments that you have in preparation for our meeting in September. And then just a reminder that next Wednesday, July 27th, we will have our second workshop here at the Farmers Market. So we are welcoming everyone to attend or stop by, and we'll also be at the concert next Thursday as well. So I know you guys have a couple other things to talk about, so I hate to cut this short, but I know we want to keep things moving as well.
Thank you. All right, senior center update, Anjali.
Good evening, Parks Commission. Anjali Maya, Director of Parks Recreation and Facilities. And I wanted to just do a quick report out on a presentation I gave to City Council last night. It was something that the council added to our work plan during the retreat, which was to look at a senior center. And what they did want us to do immediately is to look at short-term options of what we have available and can make available to this group as dedicated meeting space. So we touched upon the statistics of seniors in Sammamish. Roughly 13% of our population is above the age of 60. We also talked about current programming, what's available today. And we talked about the fact that we are a contract city and we do not offer direct programming for any age group. We do provide facilities, and then we partner with organizations such as the YMCA for our community and aquatic center, the Boys and Girls Club for our teen center, and etc. We also, what comes closest to programming for us is events. We put on a large number of events, and we make a conscious effort to make sure they're of interest to all age groups. And then, of course, we have options on our advisory boards and commissions. We see a lot of talent from our senior population serving on these commissions, and as well as other volunteer groups like our plant stewards and stormwater stewards. And then we also pointed out that both the cities of Redmond and Issaquah also have senior centers that are open to not just their population, but the areas around. They do not have a membership fee, and they do have like a suggested donation for their lunch programs and a nominal fee for their classes. And then we did come up with some good options for them, for council to consider for dedicated meeting space for seniors. And those included going back to the YMCA. They have a couple of community rooms up front as you enter the facility. And those could be made available a couple days a week for the seniors at no cost to them. And then we also have the Boys and Girls Club, and they have a similar situation. Both the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club do have the constraint that during the summer, they are occupied for summer camps. So they're only available for the rest of the year or during the evenings and weekends in the summer. Pre-pandemic, actually, there were a couple of senior groups that did utilize the space at the Boys and Girls Club, and they are willing to, do the same now that people are back meeting in person. And then finally, we looked at the lodge and what our rentals look like, the Beaver Lake Lodge at Beaver Lake Park, and found that much of the revenue is generated from evening use and weekends, and particularly Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays. So if we gave up that small amount of revenue that we get during the week, then that is another possibility. And we could always start, small and do like a trial run and scale it up. It has a kitchen, it has a capacity of 150 people, it has tables, chairs, it's in a beautiful park, ADA access, a good amount of parking. So those are all the options that we offered up. We also gave council the option to identify a provider that they would like us to work with. This was the first introductory meeting. I think we had some good conversations. We are still kind of going to note take and absorb everything we heard. Council didn't really take specific action, but maybe we need to just give it time and go back and just find answers to some of the questions they did have. And we're still compiling that from last night. But that's what I wanted to report out. And the other thing we did, we have been saying is that we are going to actually start working on our Pro Plan update, believe it or not. In January of next year, we are ready for the next Pro Plan update. And that is a good time to look at things holistically. We do an extensive public outreach, statistically valid survey, and we would be able to ask the questions of the community as what do they want, in the way of senior programming or a senior center. And we'd be able to understand that against all the other needs that the community may have, and then present those results back to our advisory boards and our council. So that is what we've proposed for a more long-term option. And then the others, of course, like the lodge and the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club are available right now. And then, of course, we mentioned that the structures at Big Rock Park are being looked at, and they could also serve some form of meeting space. But then, of course, we would have to wait a little bit for that. Any questions?
Thank you for that information, Anjali. We want to go on to your chairman's report then? I'm chairman, so I'm next, right? Okay, so I would just like to offer a brief report of our leadership meeting with the council, as well as a perspective on the Fourth on the Plateau. Just a huge success of the Fourth on the Plateau. I was there early to sort of check with the setup and see how early people were gathering to watch the fireworks. People were setting up tents and picnics as early as 4 o'clock in the afternoon to watch fireworks at 9, getting the best spots. And I guess we have a little straw poll or estimate of how many people were actually there to see the fireworks. 8,000 people came to the Commons to watch the fireworks. Is that just amazing? And I guess before COVID, we had as many as 11,000, which is phenomenal. And this is a huge successful return. I was here to go to the gym the following morning, and it looked like nothing happened. I don't understand how we can clean up and be ready to have business as usual by 9 o'clock in the morning after the 4th of July. There were banks of restrooms everywhere. They were gone. All the trash was cleaned up. There were a few little high spotlights that were being hauled away by trucks, but the city does a tremendous job of putting on this party and cleaning up after. It's just staggering. In terms of the meeting we had with the council leadership, we tried to bring forth your concerns about what you wanted to see happen in parks, and just have a really good conversation with some of the new council members. I thought it was a tremendous success. So thank you for your input. One of the things we said we wanted to see more of is the off-leash dog park, the disc golf, more community gardens, pickleball courts, more ball fields at Pine Lake, at Beaver Lake Park, more just general overall sustainable, environmentally friendly practices in the parks. Numerous ideas you guys presented to us there, including the biodegradable poop bags, which we've already done now. And there was a long discussion on hydration stations, encouraging kids and to ditch plastic water bottles, replacement of gas-powered vehicles and maintenance equipment with electric, somehow use some solar power, and then just more of these broad concepts of waterfront preservation on the East Lake Sammamish Trail, how we can make that trail more attractive with preserving views and acquiring property along there, which, as all of you know, is a big issue for me. One point I tried to make is that all the commissioners, and we've talked about this, really wanted to see this conservation futures money that the city received for the Beaton Hill and Parker properties returned to our acquisition fund. And there was a long discussion about this as well. And I feel that the new council will support bringing this money back into parks budgets, maybe reallocating it or increasing our budget for acquisition back with some of those. I think it works almost to $3 million that we receive from the county for land acquisition that we would like to see back in our funds. So I felt it was a real successful meeting, got a sense that the council is very supportive of the things that we want to accomplish as a commission. So that was very productive, and I hope that we will be meeting with them on a more regular basis. As you know, we have a September meeting with the council to talk about the master plan for Beaton Hill and Big Rock Park, and I feel that that it will be a good discussion. So that's my report. And Anjali, you're up.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'll pick up where Nancy left off with respect to events. And we have all our events that we've had pre-pandemic back. We've had summer concerts, Shakespeare in the Park, the kids' first noon series. So basically a busy and fun time in the recreation division. Lifeguarding is also on in full swing. So that's been going on. Rentals are very busy, as Alexa mentioned, and our parks maintenance crew is also working 7 days a week. They have shifts. We have seasonals that we've hired, and they come in and they open up our parks, they prep our ball fields, and there's a lot more to clean up in the summer with all the patrons that we see at this time of the year. And then our park planning team, you've heard on one big project that they've been working on today. There's other projects going on as well. And then we're all also really busy working on the biennial budget. And that is going in front of council in September. And there are 2 meetings in September. One is actually after the joint meeting. The joint meeting will go first, and then after that the actual council meeting will start, and then they will start discussing the budget, the general budget that night, and then at the end of the month on September 27th, the parks capital improvement plan and other capital improvement plans. So if that is of interest to you, please do plan on attending both meetings. And then we have on the staffing side, the good news is we have actually hired a management analyst, Janie Walser. She's been great. She's been with us about a month and a half and done some really good work, a lot of research actually on the senior centers, and then supporting us on the budget, on just about anything or everything that we need assistance with. On a not so good note for staffing, you all received an email from Chris Jordan, and he is leaving the city, and he has been with us about 5 years and really grown from what he did in his previous job. He's been wonderful for us, but we're sure he'll do good things for the county as well. And just while we were kind of absorbing that, Alexa, who was a great MC on the 4th of July and has just, if you don't know Alexa's background, she's actually, her background is in recreation. So she joined the city as an intern, and then we didn't have a position for her. She was able to find a good position in community development and was there for a bit. And then she came back to parks, and kind of we split her effort between her admin role and her recreation duties. But she wants to grow her wings. She is a Sammamish girl and would like to see what goes on in the world outside of Sammamish. So we are going to celebrate her a little bit next week. Her last day is Wednesday, and she is moving to the city of Newcastle. Her job is going to be at the city of Newcastle. We wish her the very best. Along those lines, I just wanted to share that earlier this year, we actually talked about Kevin being the staff liaison for the Parks and Recreation Commission. But right after we decided that, I also gave him facility planning to oversee along with park planning. So alongside everything you see that Kevin brings in front of you, he's also overseeing renovations of fire stations, repair of the tile at the community and aquatic center. And it's a fairly long list, but those are the multi-million. The fire stations are the big ones that he's overseeing. So I decided to, stay on and support him. But I think this is a good time. He does most of the work behind the scenes, and I will continue to support him behind the scenes. But I thought it would be a good time for me to shift gears a bit and help the staff that replaces Chris's position with the Arts Commission and the Youth Board a little bit. So with that, this is the official handoff to Kevin. So next session, you will see maybe not the joint meeting, we may not do it, but the October meeting will see a deputy director's report. And then the last update, just most of you are aware, but we did fill up all vacancies on our city council. And so we are now a full council of 7. Rituja Indapure and Roshin O'Farrell, the two, they both have, Roshin currently serves on the Planning Commission and has previously, and so has Rituja. So that is their background amongst other things. So those are all my updates. Kevin, is there anything else you would like to add?
Great, thank you. So let's move on to liaison reports. Emily, Trail Stewards.
I don't have anything to report right now. Thanks.
Okay. And Mark, Youth Board.
I'll make this really quick because the youth board basically goes on summer break, so they're not meeting until September. But and they also transition as the seniors move on. They elect new folks, which they recently did. But as I mentioned, I think the last time I reported out, they did have a presentation in front of the council on the lower Snake River Dam removal. And it was kind of sustained, and they were asked to come back, which they did on July 5th. And the outgoing board chair did send me a mail saying they approved it, which was great because he actually heard about my little incident. So he knew I wasn't really upright and wasn't able to watch their presentation. But it was, I think, very cool for them to go up and present again and get approval from the council and move forward and have that letter go to the elected officials in the governor's office. So that's very cool for them. The other thing I heard, and maybe somebody correct me wrong, because I couldn't reach out to Chris today, but I think there's 58 members of the youth board coming on in 2022 and 2023, which is the largest group we've had. So that's going to be very cool to see that many of our future residents participating in this activity. So that's great.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. That's a lot of
Yeah,
kids.
wow,
That's great. That's all I got.
thank you. And let's see, Sammamish YMCA.
I don't really have anything to report. I gave her written notes to Alexa, and people can just read it. We went on hiatus for July and August, so it's out of date anyway. Last time we met was June, so I'll just keep it short.
And I will forward that all to you via email, so you have that for your review.
Great, great. So next up, next meeting is Community Gardens with me, Youth Sports with Hank, and then Sid, Sammamish Friends. So you'll be through the mud run at that point, right? So you can give us a report on that. And are you looking for volunteers for the mud run?
Yes, please volunteer if you are going to be in town August 20th. We would love to have you.
Okay, great. All right, anything else? Remembering that it's really important to attend the council meeting. We're off for August. It's really important to attend the joint parks and council meeting on September 13th. This is-
Also, if you would, so excuse me, Nancy, but
Go
if
ahead.
folks would note that meeting will start at 5:30 rather than 6:30.
Does it start with the joint meeting right away? Because in the past so they're going to start with the joint meeting and then they'll go into their own business. Okay, so that's important to note. Thank you very much, Kevin, for that. So it's very important, and we'll access those plans on the on the internet and make more notes about things that you see that are important to address. But this has been a great discussion on this, I think, and a good starting point. I need some, we could use more hands, and I particularly for the long, let's see, it's the farmer's market, for collecting public opinion at the farmer's market. So Adina, I remember you were interested in doing that. So let's get together about that. If there's anybody else who would like to try to collect public opinion at the farmer's market, when we're on for that, that would be great. Let me know.
What date are we scheduled to do that?
It's July
Uh,
27th,
September the 27th.
July
I
27th.
mean, July 10th, July 24th.
We're also doing a
So next
booth-
week.
Yeah, next week. We're also doing a booth at the concert in the park on the 28th.
That's
So
right.
we have kind of back-to-back events there.
Okay.
I think the concert in the park will be probably a shorter, but the farmer's market goes on from 4 till 8 in the evening, so it'd be nice to tag team with a couple of people. Sid's willing, okay?
With the farmer's market, we
Farmer's
will
market, I'm
have,
sorry, the farmer's market.
we're going to have all of the boards in here in this room, and we'll also have a booth outside. So then at the booth, we'll be sending people in here and have them walk through
Oh.
the different boards. So having people, it would be great to have additional people both at the booth out there and then pointing them in here and also passing out cards with a QR code for doing our survey.
Great. Is it possible to have the doors open here?
Yeah.
So that'd be really nice, I
Yeah.
think, instead of having people go through but
But we
for-
were planning.
yeah, that'd be great. All right. Any other business? We have our agenda calendar. If there's any objections, let's adjourn the meeting. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.